My guest today is Mike Lee. Mike is a personal trainer and an educator who's been working in the fitness industry for 11 years. In that time, he's been a face-to-face personal trainer, a CrossFit gym coach, a mentor to new coaches, a CrossFit gym manager and owner, and an online coach and educator. But the story behind this journey is fascinating. Mike was in his early 20s when he fractured his back. He put it down to overtraining, overworking, and not making enough time for recovery. The doctors told Mike he would never deadlift, squat, or Olympic lift again, but Mike wasn't happy with that answer. For the next 9 months, Mike had to rethink his training and how he worked with his clients. This was when he started to move some of his clients online so he could make more time to prioritise his own health. It was at this point in his career that Mike took a holiday and managed to earn pretty much the same wage that he would have if he stayed working at the gym. His online business had reached a level where he could travel and work if he wanted to. Currently, Mike is coaching clients with back pain and doing injury rehab. He also works with a lot of athletes who want to increase their performance. Mike is also writing and coaching educational courses for coaches. If you're a personal trainer looking to build and grow an online business, you're going to get a lot out of this episode. We talk about Mike's transition to online coaching, how he grew his business, and what he thinks of the fitness education system. Mike is certainly an ideas man, and he's definitely got a knack for seeing the gaps in the market that can be filled by online personal trainers. I hope you enjoy this episode with Mike Lee. Let's get stuck in.
As you've probably done as well, as like I've played with various titles, but fundamentally I'm a personal trainer and an educator. So, I do personal training with my clients and I do education with other coaches. So I write programs, I teach seminars on effectively how to coach various elements of fitness. It's a bit more specialized within Olympic weightlifting and more specifically the functional fitness side of Olympic weightlifting. But yeah, fundamentally I am a personal trainer and I try not to move away from that.
Yeah, stay in your lane, mate, as they say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So your business now, are you working face-to-face, online, bit of both? What's happening?
I try to keep a little bit of everything. So my remote clients, I do majority of it is remote training. So writing programs for various people. I kind of have almost just two avatars, which is athletes and then people in pain. And there's not really much in between. I don't have a huge lot of fat loss or like bodybuilding clients as much anymore. And it seems to be just one or the other at the moment. And I do probably about 7 or 8 hours of personal training, more for the social aspect, if I'm honest. Like talking to another human being actually next to someone is super important, I think. And then finally, I do about 8 to 10 hours a week of writing fitness content for the PFCA, which is, I guess, the education branch of March On. So it's run by Ollie March On and Jens Robinson. And recently joined them to build out a weightlifting course and some weightlifting seminars, which has been going really well.
Yeah, wicked, mate.
It's a new challenge as well, which is cool.
There's so much to tap into and I want to talk to you about, mate. It's great to see that you've got your hands in lots of different pies and, you're learning new skills all the time and still obviously growing in your personal training career. How long have you been in the game for?
Probably, like looking down at the date now in my corner. I guess it's 11 years now, which feels like a really long time. But I guess actually the past 3 years have just gone super fast. So yeah, 11 years is how long I've been doing this.
So showing your age now.
I know. No, clearly I'm not 21 anymore.
And how long have you been doing online coaching?
So about 6 years now. So I started going online because I had a full PT book and there was part of me that just was like, this can't be sustainable for me. So what I started doing was like trying to get my mornings back. So I'd just do PT basically from 9 till 8 as opposed to 6 a.m. till 8, because often 6 a.m. meant getting up at 4:30, and that's the part of the day that I wanted back for no other reason than to sleep. So I started moving all my early clients to remote coaching, and it's a hit to your income initially, but it's slightly more passive. And I kind of developed a system where most of my remote coaching is actually PT clients that have graduated to remote coaching. So I'm like, I trust that you can do this on your own. I've spent some time working one-to-one with you. let's put you onto remote programming, and we'll touch base now and then with maybe a PT session or a call, depending on what they wanted. That was the beginning. And obviously since then, it's started to grow more, like a bit more organically. Like I have people all around the world now, which is, it's quite cool because I have a lot of people who I've never actually met in person, which is I always find really interesting.
We'll talk a little bit more about that, maybe how you found those clients and how the business is going, further on.
Yeah.
Before we do, like when you were working, in the gym and you were delivering these sort of 50 hours or, doing so much work, working such long days, like how are you feeling at that time?
I guess there's two ways to describe it. There's imposter syndrome, right? There's the fact that I'm doing this thing that I actually really enjoy doing and I'm getting paid for it. And I'm like, is this like, because I was so actively researching training methods and everything around that, it felt like quite an easy thing for me to be delivering to clients, which is not actually the reality of it in a lot of circumstances. And the other one was I felt a bit hypocritical. So I was like, I'm delivering all of this information, but actually like I was sleeping like 4.5, 5 hours. I was eating whatever sustained me through the day, which consisted of a large amount of caffeine as well. So I was like, three coffees and a pre-workout to effectively get me through my day. And then you're just like, and I had other PTs, at the time that were 40 when I was like 22, 23, were like, just you wait. And I was like, yeah, whatever, granddad. And there's an element of truth to it. It's like you do burn out a little bit. And to me, I was finding less and less desire to train because actually in those hour and a half, 2 hours that I had in a day, I would rather sleep and catch up because my body just needed that. So that's, I think, when I started thinking, I'm 22, 23, can't do this for too long.
I don't think a lot of PTs get that in perspective so young. Like we step into the industry, we're very passionate about what we do. And, it's the culture is hustle culture. And it is, you've got to work more to earn more. And in a sense, I think you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because if you do keep pushing yourself, it is that one-way ticket to burnout and our health does start to suffer. So here we are trying to preach health, but yet we can't even practice it and look after ourselves.
Yeah.
How was your health going? Did you notice any sort of health issues at the time?
Yeah. At 23, I fractured my back and it was like a compound fracture from overdoing it with weightlifting. And the hard part for me was that I moved relatively well coming from a gymnastics background. And so if you were going to pick apart my movement, you'd probably have a bit of a hard time going, yeah, that was a drastically wrong thing. But I was just doing too much. I was probably training twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day, 6 days a week, trying to do like 35 to 40 hours of PT, sleeping 5 hours. And I was like really relying on the fact that my body was young and bouncing back, except this time it didn't. And yeah, that took about 9 months for me to recover from. And it forced me to slow down because I couldn't even get into a deadlift position with an empty bar. So I was like, in many ways, it made me better as a coach because I was like, now I have to like orally explain what I want them to see when I could just be showing them. And in some cases, I just showed them and just dealt with the pain, especially if they were brand new. But I don't think I told anyone that I'd fractured my back for like 5 months because it was like this almost shame around it, right? It's like you're a PT, you're supposed to be healthy, and now you're carrying this injury. And I think a lot of PTs that get injured like have that struggle. You're not supposed to get injured. You're supposed to be the epitome of health and fitness. And yeah, so yeah, that was the big defining moment for me.
How far from the truth can that be, mate? Sometimes, especially in this industry, I couldn't agree with you more. I think you and I went down a similar journey. When I transitioned to online, I did a very similar thing where it was like a hybrid model. The clients that I was working with face to face, I was doing PT and I was trying to run momentum training in the gym and just didn't have the time for the clients. So it was like, okay, I'd see them maybe once a month face to face and then send them off, with a program. How did you find clients accepted that when you were sort of pushing back on the face to face and saying, hey, how about you go online?
For some of them, it was like going from, £900 a month of expenses if they're coming down 3 times a week to like 240. And I'd be like, what I did with them is like, I'd like to see you once a month, but here is where I would spend that money to better your health. And it was like, we can even go down the route of like, we can get you a new mattress and that will be revolutionary to your sleep. I was like, 2-3 months of the money that you're going to save on here, and you've got some like custom made blackout blinds for your room, literally little things like this. And I'm like, if this doesn't work for you, then we'll go back to PT. That's fine, but let's try it. And for some of them, I have a couple of clients who they just couldn't do it. They were like, I'm just not going to come in. It's the fact that I've paid this money that is actually motivating me. Like I have such a high value on the finances that I'm paying this money almost to make myself go. So it's not about the saving of money or anything, but a lot of them did well with it. And for those that didn't, I tried to like shift them a little bit. I'd be like, well, I've got a 7 a.m. slot available 3 days a week, rather than like saying they can come in at 6 a.m. Is it doable? But I did have to just say to people, a few of them, where I was like, I'm just not doing 6 a.m. anymore. I was like, it would not be good for me to preach to you, like, you need to do this, this, and this for your health when I'm not doing it myself. And I was like, 6 a.m. for you when you live 15 minutes away is like a get up at 5:40, throw some coffee in the general direction of your face and roll into the gym. Whereas for me, it was like 35-40 minute train, make myself look presentable for a day of work because I've got 3 hours of back to back. So I was like, yeah, for me, I just wanted to get that lifestyle back. And fortunately, because a lot of my clients were relatively long term, they were quite understanding of it.
Yeah, definitely. When you say you want to get that lifestyle back, is it your own health that you're really trying to prioritize there, or was it just your mental health? Like what was the driver behind that, do you think?
It was a bit of both. Like my relationship at the time was suffering because of it. And we both worked in the same industry. And I think because I was out all the time, we just never really got to see each other. And she tended to do later sessions. So she'd come home like 9:30, whereas I was like, I'm gone by that time in bed. So there was that side of things. But there was also like, fracturing my back just kind of shows that you're just not recovering from the load that you're putting through your body. And most of the time, what you need for better recovery is more time to recover, whether that's sleep, whether that's prioritizing your food, whether that's just down regulating your system, whatever it is. I just didn't have that time. So yeah, I think I had like a pocket of 30 minutes after training in my day that was like quite chilled, where we'd all go grab a coffee, which again is like finish training that was like super high stimulating, and then throw some more stimulating stuff to get you through the next 3 hours. And that'd be like 4 p.m. So it's like putting some pretty strong coffee through you at 4 p.m. to get you through. It's like even the sleep I was having wasn't good.
That was a very well timed yawn.
Yeah, it was, right? Do you know what? I'm actually off caffeine entirely at the moment. But I mean, this would be a big old tangent. But I got sick about 5 weeks ago, and I was like forced off all coffee. And then as I got better, I was like, maybe don't go straight back into drinking like 2 cups of coffee a day. Like, see if you get to 10 a.m. and you feel like you need it. So, and I haven't really. So yeah, I might have one as a social thing, but like it's something I've taken out for a while. Experiment. I'm not anti-caffeine. I love coffee.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one, mate. But like you say,
Yeah.
I think in the personal training days, I was very similar to you. There'd be a coffee before work, there'd be a coffee after the morning clients, there'd be a coffee after lunch. And then, maybe if you're feeling flat for the evening, it's like, I'll have another coffee so I can get through the evening sessions.
Do you know what was a crazy moment for me? I think it was my second year of PT. And do you remember Monmouth in Borough Market?
Yep.
The coffee place. So I was doing my tax return that year, and I'd spent $3,500 at Monmouth.
Ooh, that's a lot of coffee.
That's a lot of coffee, right? And that was 3 times a day, plus the occasional like buying coffee for someone else or like a brownie post training. And I was like, every day. And I was like, oh my God, it actually does add up to that. I was like, that is a disgraceful amount to have spent on coffee when I could have just got a coffee machine. I could have hired a barista for that.
You could have bought a pretty good mattress for that and some nice blackout curtains.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's fast forward a bit now, mate. So then you've got the online business now, and obviously you started transitioning the PT clients you had, and I think that was a great way to do it. Obviously, you've been working with them; they know you, your style of programming. Obviously, your initial influx of clients are probably the clients that you were working face to face with. Was that enough to sustain you for a period of time, or did you have to start going out and finding more clients? Like, how did the business grow?
It was a little bit. Like, I probably would say that I had like 10 remote clients for quite a long time, because I was like happy. So I wasn't actively trying to grow the business in any way. I was like, those 10, they were bringing in, I think at the time, like £1,500 a month. And on top of like personal training and teaching a couple of classes, a CrossFit gym, I was pretty content with that. But then what I ended up doing is, when I moved to that CrossFit gym, is I just ended up building up the exact same cycle that I did just at a different gym. And so it was when I left there where I started actively going, well, why don't I just try and move all my personal training clients onto remote training and then see what I have with that time. And if I miss it, I'll go back and do more, because there is demand for it, especially in London, there's always demand for it. And if I don't, well, then now I have a business that I can effectively run from anywhere in the world. And I was running it at the same time as I was CEO of CrossFit London. And that was the challenging period for me. It did bring me more clients in just because of the prestige of the title of that job, right? And what I'll preface that by saying is that just because you're running a gym doesn't necessarily mean that you're the best coach for that person, but people attach it and they want that person. So I had a couple of new additions there. And when I left CrossFit London, in the 3 or 4 months prior to that, I was making quite a big push to like build that up. And I think I had like 25 to 30 by the end of that. And I realized, like, when I left, I think it was 2018. The September of 2018, I went to run the Hawaii Trail Run with Power Monkey. And I actually only went to Hawaii for like 3 days. So I went to Hawaii and I went to Dubai. I went to North Carolina for my cousin's wedding. And I went to Italy, all in the space of 5 weeks. And I earned £400 less than if I'd stayed in London.
Wow.
And I was like, I think I've done it. I was like, I think I've built the business where I could technically travel the world if I wanted to. And so that was a sick moment for me. And it also meant that then I was like, well, I'm just going to keep building this, right? And this is where I'm going to go with it. And I started to put myself out there a little bit more, started to reach out to people in different countries. So like looking at like Saudi and stuff like that. Especially one of my clients, Farah, she's been brilliant. And I started coaching her based on the fact that she was like constantly in pain, but she's a relatively athletic, constantly in pain. And you'll have seen the type. It's like, I've just got a niggle in my left knee, left elbow, right shoulder. My back plays up a little bit now and then, but I can still lift silly amounts of weight, right? So I was telling her, I was like, it's not only is it not a sustainable approach, but it's not how it should be. Like, you can do these things out of pain. So I started working with her and she got out of pain relatively quickly. And that culture over there is very like, it's almost like family oriented. Word of mouth goes so much further. And she sent me a few other people that were in like way higher levels of pain. And my Saudi clients now are almost majority back pain, right? And I love training those guys, but almost everything I've done is word of mouth. And you can have the best business strategy, you can have the most technical knowledge, but if you don't actually get the results for the people in the end, they're probably not going to stick around, or they're probably not going to refer you anyone, right? Like, the most powerful referral tool is achieving or exceeding like your client's expectations. And with the case with Dean, which was one of my stronger back pain clients, she had back pain for like 28 years. She was in line for like 3 surgeries. She was on medications. And I was like, I'm going to preface this by saying, I don't know if I can help you. I'm going to do my best. And I think that's something that a lot of trainers don't do. It's like they are the cure for every single problem. And that's not, like, you need to be able to say, I don't know, and I'm going to try and find out, or I don't know, but here's someone who might. right?
Yeah.
Because they respect, that keeps the level of respect between you and the client a lot more than them working with you for 6 months and you still not being able to solve the problem. So yeah, I'm great at tangents, Stretch. So just pull me back when I've gone.
No, mate, I love it because what you're saying there resonates 100%. I think it's very, very powerful. I think, a lot of personal trainers are accepting clients that they don't know how to help because it's that fear of like, I need to get paid, I need the money. And they don't have the power to turn clients away. And we do have the best intentions. We do want to go and research back pain, knee pain, the different things that we have to. But if you're working 40, 50 hours a week just training clients and writing programs, like where do you find the time to research 100 different goals?
Yeah.
It's interesting because, you talk about your own experience there. In the past, you've had back pain and you've had to rehab yourself and you've learnt, probably the way to train and you understand, how crippling back pain can be. Do you think your own experience there has really helped you to connect with the clients that you serve?
Absolutely. Because one of the things that like when someone's telling me their story of like how back pain's affecting their life, I'm like, I fully understand. Because for her, when she's like, I've had back pain for like 25, 29 years, I'm like, I had back pain for 9 months and I was an unbearable person to be around. I was like, I was so like, because I was quite young at the time, I was so angry. I was like, why is this happening to me? Like I move well, I couldn't understand it. And so I spent so much time figuring out why it happened to me. And I think, a huge amount of pain generally comes from a lack of strength in a certain area, right? And so as a result, something breaks. Now, when that something breaks, the worst side effect is that generally the person gets weaker and weaker and weaker. So the small amount of strength that they had supporting whatever structure went is now getting less and less and less. And so often, I talk to people about like one of the first stages for me of fixing someone's back pain is figuring out a way that we can get them to deadlift pain free. And it might be a long roundabout way to get there, but I've met a lot of physios and I've been told a lot from clients who've been to physios, they're like, you can never deadlift again, right? You can't squat again, right? And this was the experience that I had. Was I had private healthcare. I went to a surgeon that cost like £300 for a 20-minute consult, and then it's being paid through my insurance. But ultimately, he said, "Okay, so what hurts?" And I was like, deadlifts, squats, cleans, snatches, overhead squats, standing up too fast, lunging. And he was literally just like, all right, so don't do any of those anymore. And I said, for how long? And he was like, well, for the foreseeable future. I was like, this is my job. Like I teach people how to do these things. And I said to him, I was like, just humor me. Like, do you know what a deadlift is? And he was like, that's this thing, right? I was like, no. I was like, this is saying to me, like, effectively, if I drop something on the floor, just leave it there. That's what you're telling me to do. It's just never pick anything up off the floor ever again. And I said, like, with all due respect, like, I am sure that you are fantastic at opening people up and fusing and fixing and things like that. But I need someone to tell me how to get back to health, not how to avoid those aspects of health in the first place. So I've always said to people, it's like, sometimes surgery is the only way, especially if it's like an impact thing. Like you've been in a car crash, probably not gonna, like dead bug your way out of this, right? Like, so I relate to them because I'm like, I understand the emotional side of this. And I understand that like, I am just not a very nice person to be around when I'm injured. And so I understand that even if yours isn't expressed with like anger, it could be just like, you're just a shadow of yourself, right? Especially back injuries. You physically can't do anything if it's crippling. So you can't walk for a long period of time. You can't stand up. Even sitting down hurts. So it's like, what do you do? And it ages you. That is the biggest thing that I've noticed is like, when you take someone out of back pain, they are like 10 years younger immediately, right? And so, yeah, I think having had those injuries, and I've had a number of injuries, I tore my ACL, I've had fractured back, I've had bursitis in my shoulder and my hip. So I understand, it took me probably all of those injuries to understand really what a more sustainable training model looked like, but for me personally. But what's interesting is I was doing those things already for clients. It's like, you need to train more sustainably. But in my world, and obviously like your world as well, you have people who are actually uninjured, training 6 days a week, doing quite well. And I'm like, actually, when I train 5 days a week, I start to break quite quickly. So I generally do 4 days a week and then sit in front of the TV on that bike, for another 2 days at like the easiest pace possible, right? So I think there's, going back to that like hustle culture, right, of fitness professionals. It's like, get up at 4 a.m, train at 5. You're like, no, fuck, man, that's awful. No part of me wants to do that, right? And what you're telling me there is like, don't sleep for an extra 2 hours every day because someone on social media told you. Sorry about swearing. I don't know what you're.
No, it's all good, mate. No stress at all. I think
I was like, you're Australian. This is like your second language.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I love what you're doing, Mike. In a sense, I really resonate with the idea that you can show up with a lot of empathy and a lot of authority around the injury stuff because it's an experience that you've been through and you really understand. Even if it was 9 months that you went through and some of your clients have been going through back pain for years, it just allows you to understand where they're at and really meet them where they're at. So I can see that as obviously being a really powerful tool for you to engage these clients that have got injuries. I'm a little bit curious about the athlete side. What makes you want to work with athletes and where did that come about?
Yeah, so it's interesting. It was actually when I first started at Fitness First, where there was a guy that was training there who he was built like he's actually he's a good friend of mine now. And he was incredibly athletic, like super good looking guy, half Spanish, half English, like really polite as well. Basically should have been in Hollywood, but instead was in a banking industry. But PTs would always talk to him and everything. And then one day he literally came up to me. He was like, I want to understand how you do the things that you do being so much smaller than everyone else. And I was like, I was the smallest PT in the gym because everyone else was a lot more either powerlifting or bodybuilding focused. And I'd kind of come from a gymnastics background. And he's like, I don't understand how like I'm so much bigger than you, but you can do these things. It doesn't make sense to me. And he came from a rugby background. And interestingly, his knowledge of actual nutrition and training was tragic, but he was just an unbelievably gifted athlete. And I started to get more out of like him advancing and him unlocking like these crazy weights, even though he'd already had a relatively strong athletic career, just through the technique side of things. And I realized that, most athletes, you don't have to motivate them to go to the gym. Like arguably, if you are a competitive athlete and you're needing to be motivated to go to the gym, you're probably never going to make it. Right. And so what I started to see, I was like, well, how many of these people are training too much because they're wrapped up in that kind of like hustle culture of training? And how many of them are not hitting their potential because either their technique is flawed or they are actually training too many hours that they can't recover? It's like diminishing returns, right? And so I started training these guys more within a CrossFit side. And I guess as those guys moved away from Fitness First and went to like places like Gymbox or other CrossFit gyms, and they, would just rock up to a competition, no one's ever heard of them, and then just crush it, people started to ask questions and like be like, well, what do you do? And what like, do you train in a class? Because at the time, remote training for CrossFit was still pretty small. And you might have it if you are, at the CrossFit Games, but you didn't have it if you were just a regular like athlete within a class. And what I noticed was that like, look, if a class situation doesn't fully benefit me because I need a certain amount of time to warm up or I need to spend more time building my leg strength, then it's going to be the same for pretty much everyone if they want to advance more on an athletic basis rather than, social and community basis, which to me is the biggest, most powerful part of a CrossFit gym is the social aspect. Pull me back, help. I'm going.
No, it's good, mate. I'm just wondering where the athlete thing started, but you're making a really good point there in a sense of you found a gap in the market because I can go to a class and I can want to be an athlete and compete, but if the class is not set up around my individual needs and what I need to train, then it's not going to help me get to that athletic sort of potential or where I want to get to. And here you are presenting yourself as, hey, I'm an online coach and I can help you get your performance there. It's allowing you to obviously take on those athletes. So you've always sort of had a passion for just performance really, or training athletes, or the competition side of things, or what led you to go down training athletes?
Yeah, I guess trying to be one myself as well was a huge driving factor, and realizing that, you know, in the early days of competing with CrossFit, like it would have been very hard to beat me on a gymnastics based workout. Now it's probably not so much the case, but I was severely lacking in the leg strength area and really endurance. And I guess that was the opposite to 90% of people coming into CrossFit. Like I was the person who could almost hit 30 unbroken muscle ups on the rings way before anyone else could do it. And that was like in my head, I was like, keep trying it, you can get it. And it will be like this massive thing. And I only ever got to 28, which is really annoying.
I know, so close.
And I'm pretty sure this is how I got shoulder bursitis as well. It's just keep trying to do this. But yeah, I think being able to do those things like commanded a certain amount of like respect from people, because it was like I was just so much better at these kind of things. But what people didn't see is that this was 3-4 years of pure gymnastics training at university, like doing levers, doing human flags, doing all of the like cross work and stuff like that. It just builds you unbelievable shoulder strength that you're not going to get from simply just kipping in class every, you know, twice every week. So I think when people started to like join me and be like, well, I want to get better at this, this, and this, and I'd be like, okay, well, this is pretty much going to be bodybuilding-esque stuff for gymnastics. Like you need to build this area up. And yeah, now I went down the weightlifting route after that. And I'll be honest, if you've done gymnastics, learning the snatch is a lot easier, I would say. Learning the clean and jerk felt like this constant like torment every session, because it was like you get under the bar and probably never stand it up was generally my first 3 years of clean and jerks. So as I progressed quickly with that as well, it's like, okay, well now you're good at weightlifting and you're good at gymnastics. And to be honest, that's the sexy stuff of CrossFit, right? No one wants to see someone spend 60 minutes on an erg, even though that is arguably more important than everything put together. I think I built that base purely off being able to command that kind of respect, which isn't necessarily the best way, but it was the way it happened at the time. And it allowed me to have a platform to then explain the knowledge side of things. And I think that is the reality of our world still, is you've got people who are unbelievable athletes selling thousands of programs, though they don't actually almost understand the program themselves. And you will have people who, you know, a lot of the CrossFit stuff is based off graft and natural resilience and, you know, other things I've talked about more recently, extravenous help. But yeah, I mean, I've always enjoyed training athletes because it's like, it's cool to see them celebrate those little wins, especially when they do something they didn't believe that they could. That's cool. Or they get to a level that they didn't think was necessarily possible.
That's awesome, mate. It's like you've really found a niche that you enjoy training, and I think you can really relate it to your own journey, your own experience. And it's wicked to see that you've built a business around that, because I think a lot of coaches go down okay, I'm going to train weight loss clients because that's a huge market. But if you're not passionate about that, and if that doesn't get you out of bed in the morning, then it's not a sustainable career. Like it's not something you're going to enjoy.
And that's never been really my side. Like I've done it with a few clients, but it's always like, you know, fundamentally it comes down to like get in the gym and eat a little bit less. You know, like there's an element of it where you need to feel a little bit hungry every day. And I'm like, if you feel a little bit hungry every day, you're probably in that region where you're losing weight, you know? And so I've never really got super passionate about that. I think there's also the element of like, I've never had to lose weight myself. Like I was super, super skinny as a kid growing up. And therefore, like my thing has always been like even now in my brain, and I know it's not right, but it's like, you're still that small kid at school. You're still that small kid at school. So like, to me, I'm not passionate about making people physically smaller. You know, like I'd have rather have been, you know, that a little bit on the chunkier side, but able to build some muscle quite quickly when I was younger, rather than be like a 50 5 kilo 17-year-old.
Like, to switch it back around to the business, like with your online business, has there been some mistakes you feel that you've made along the way, or some lessons that you've learned?
Fucking loads of mistakes. Getting into one kind of training method is a huge one. And then not so much everyone needs it, but like as a kid, I used to train who, after I'd done like the aerobic capacity courses and the power speed endurance stuff, we did a ton of nasal breathing work, and his like aerobic capacity was huge, but his ability to suffer was nothing. Just, it was like I'd wrapped him in bubble wrap, and any workout that got intense, he just couldn't do anymore. He just could not put himself in that dark place. And it was quite a big lesson for me, where I was like, oh wow, like, I mean, I fully bought into this, but I missed a huge part of the picture, where I'm like, actually a huge part of like CrossFit is you need to suffer. His ability to recover from basically anything I gave him was amazing. However, when push came to shove and you put him in like the dark place, he just got out of there. He's like, I need to go back to my like safe nasal breathing work, you know? And so there's that, and, you know, not necessarily related to that specifically, but related to any kind of course you go down. You can buy into, everyone that sells a course, right, has their own bias. Like, it's their method. It's the thing that works. This is the be all and end all. When realistically, I think when you go into these things, that is the danger, is you now just become a sheep of that group, right? Whether, like, for me, for a while, it was like OPEX for a while. And then I started to pick apart their methods as well. And then you go down and you do like the Bergener strength course or something like that. And you're like, and then you realize, actually, if you take 70% of what you've learned on these courses and use the other 30% to either develop your own way of thinking, like you learn way more about how they've come up with the course, as opposed to simply learning their methods, right? And that's, you know, that's where it's principle driven, right? You know, fundamentally, the 900 methods there are out there of putting on muscle all come down to, you know, progressive overload, eat more, make sure you recover. But I mean, it is almost that simple, right? If you have a calorie surplus and you're training relatively hard to the point where, you know, over 8 to 10 weeks, like, you are overloading your body more, you will have put on muscle, right? So whatever method got you to buy into that principle is, I guess, the method that worked for you. But then understanding that just because it worked for one person doesn't necessarily mean it worked for another, right? I don't know if you ever did it, like the whole Smolov cycle, Russian squat cycle. And it's like, I put 30 kilos on my back squat in about 6 weeks, I think it was, when I was young. Like, now, if I did that, I'd be like, Mike's juicing. But like, when I was like when I was 21 and I'd barely squatted, it kind of made sense. But the biggest thing I came out with was really sore knees. I was like, I had 30 kilos on my squat, and then I needed like 5 weeks off squatting because my knees hurt so much. However, I have people who have done those cycles, and they're like, they could probably do them back to back, go into the next one, go into the next one. They can just handle that volume. So yeah, making sure that you work with the client in front of you very specifically, not just on their program themselves, but like, you know, almost taking into account their training history, their genetic resilience to just anything is super important. So not making the mistake of just going, there's one amazing method that I've discovered that seems to work for almost everyone I come across, because eventually you'll come across people it doesn't work for, and you don't get any better. You just become a follower of that method.
Yeah, a sheep, as you say, mate. I get you. Yeah. With your online training that you offer now, like, what's involved with that? Are you just writing a program? Are there consults, nutrition? Like, how are you helping your clients?
So my nutritional advice is always relatively basic. I generally don't have to do nutrition work with a lot of my clients because they're performance athletes. The nutrition side is make sure we're eating enough first and foremost. And, you know, I've had to almost like gently force feed more people. But I rarely have to cut things out too much. It's more specific things around sports nutrition, like supplementation, like hydration, electrolytes, carb consumption, stuff like that. And the The only problems I run into with nutrition is if people have had like a bodybuilding background where they're judged on their aesthetics and they've gone down that like, oh, I can't eat too many carbs. And you're like, no, you need all the carbs, eat all the carbs. Here's a free pass for carbs. And so that's the only part I have to really worry about with nutrition to some extent. So I program basically either 3 times a week or unlimited coaching, and unlimited coaching is usually 5 or 6, right? And the 3 times a week is often when it accompanies something else. So whether it accompanies like someone who's predominantly a runner or a swimmer or whatever, and they're looking to build strength and conditioning into their program, or they're a class person who wants to do class twice a week, but then work with me on other things 3 times a week. And the 5 or 6 times a week is like, really, I need you to just hand over the reins. I need you to stop doing random classes or random things, because I'm like, it takes a lot for those kind of people to fully buy in sometimes. They're used to being quite volume junkie people. And sometimes the 5 or 6 days that I'm training them is actually a reduction in what they were doing before, because they were on twice a day, 6 days a week. But I usually relay it back to you, like, you came to me for a reason. Like, you're asking me my opinion on what you're doing right now and where we can improve. And me taking things away from you, your training, is not because I don't like you training. It's because I want you to meet the progress that you want, right? I want you to meet your expectations and your goals of yourself. So it will either be like monthly catch-ups, but I've adopted a slightly different approach to a lot of online client coaches. I let my clients talk to me on WhatsApp, because to me, if I can't get back to them, within 24 hours on WhatsApp, I've taken on too much, right? So whilst they have access to me, and it's a lot, if I'm on my computer and a WhatsApp thing pops up and goes, hey man, does this look okay before I do the next 5 sets? And I literally watch a 7-second video and go, yeah. And that's the feedback they needed for that week. That's like, I'm doing a disservice if I said, wait till Sunday, I'll watch your video then.
Correct.
And I don't, that works for me. It doesn't necessarily work for everyone. Some people get overwhelmed by the amount of messages they receive. But I try to, when I'm writing the programs, I try to put in the intent so that they get educated on it. And so they don't actually need to ask me as many questions. And I often say, like, a lot of my remote clients probably know as much as a lot of PTs. Well, a lot of them are coaches already, but a lot of them know as much as other PTs. And it's interesting, that came from a PT questioning one of my clients when she was at Gymbox. And he was saying, you should do this instead. And she was like, you have no idea of my goals or intentions. And then effectively schooled him on why she was effectively doing half rep deadlifts. Like, basically, she was just pulling to the knee instead. And I was like, because you're working on a first pull, not working on the full rep, right? So that was kind of like a proud moment for me, where I was like, yes, you go.
I don't know about you, Mike, but I found that when I took more clients online, I actually found that they got better results. And I think that it empowered them to take more responsibility for their own training. And they did want to learn more. Okay, I've got to teach myself now. And they're watching their videos. They're understanding how to read the program. They're seeing their progress. They're challenging themselves with their own weights. Like, it just took away so much of them putting responsibility on me as a PT, and then putting the responsibility on themselves. What have you found?
I think you have 2 different types, right? You have people who need a good amount of hand holding at the beginning. And if you do hold their hand, it's like, well, you've guided them into like this level where they understand more. But if you chose to be like I said before, it's like, I'll answer your stuff on Sunday. They go for weeks where they've got all of these questions that are building up. And it's like, it used to, like, I always say to people, look, if you don't ask questions, how am I going to know? Like, that you don't understand it, whether you don't understand the intent. I said, I understand that a lot of people might see it as like challenging, but to me, I'm like, if I go to a seminar, I'm a guy who asks all the questions because it helps me understand. So if I have a coach, I ask all the questions because it helps me understand, right? It's nothing to do with challenging, because I always see it as, why would I pay someone money and then just question everything that they do? Right? I could just not pay them money and question everything they do in silence, you know? So I do encourage my clients to ask me questions as to why. And because a lot of my clients are coaches already, I'm like, this is just going to better help you understand how you might use this with your clients.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people see that as like more of a mentorship. I'm like, I probably learned more off the coaches that I'd had in history from doing the program and asking the questions than I did off doing an entire programming seminar, you know?
Yeah,
because your real life situations versus on paper and kind of avatars, right?
I agree with you 100%, mate. The coaches or the mentorships, as you might put them, or whatever you want to call it, that I've had have helped me more, and I've learned way more from that experience than from any textbook, podcast, certification, or course. And I think it's it's over that long period of time, isn't it? You're working with a coach, and you've got that ability to ask those questions and see how they do it. So, yeah, I definitely resonate with what you're saying there. And it sounds like now, obviously, you're stepping into coaching more coaches with all these courses and stuff like that. How did that come about?
So I'd done a couple of seminars in the past that were more client centric, and a few coaches would turn up to that. And actually, the clients that would sign off the back of those were often the coaches. It wasn't really the members. They were kind of loyal to their gyms and they wanted to just do classes, but just get a better technique wise. And then I started doing, actually, it's probably only recently where I've done seminars purely for coaches. And even those, you still get a couple of clients turn up. But I think it's easy to forget that when you've been in the industry for 11 years, you've got these new faces popping up in the industry that like 3 or 4 years into their career, and they're big, like whether they're big on social media coaching or whether they're like big athletes, whatever, they still have things to learn. And they still, what's interesting to me is, and it's always humbling that like the things that I am talking about, they're like, oh my God, that was amazing. Whereas like, maybe if I've spoken to you about it, you're like, yeah, of course. Yeah. But to them, it's blown their mind. Right. And what I've been doing recently and what I'm coaching, the next seminar that I'm coaching is weightlifting for coaches. And almost every weightlifting seminar is geared towards getting you to get better at weightlifting. Right. So I was like, that is effectively making people better athletes, but it doesn't make them better coaches. Right. So when those coaches go away from those seminars, they don't actually have a better sense of how to teach weightlifting. And I was like, there is fundamentally a huge lack of coaching around weightlifting from a functional fitness perspective. So barbell cycling, coaching general population people into weightlifting. Mm-hmm. But there's also a huge lack of understanding. It's like, why are we doing this complex? Why would we pull off the floor with straps? Why would we do deficit stuff? Why would we do this? There's almost like this, just do this because it works. But why does it work, right? And when the coaches understand why it works, they can go and invent their own way of teaching it, right? So if I teach someone why a deficit snatch pull works, they might go, well, if that works, maybe I could do a deficit split squat for this person because it's effectively the same principle, right? So again, that is making better coaches, right? Which everyone benefits from at the end of the day. Because, going back to what I said at the very beginning, the reason I always still describe myself as a personal trainer is people shy away from that because the perception is that it's a simple job and that they need something more fancy, right? Movement guru, whatever it is, and specialist. And like, I've played with those things as well, but I'm like, well, at the end of the day, I'm still a personal trainer. And why don't we elevate the profession as opposed to like leave it in the dust and go find something else that sounds a bit nicer? Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it's just like I often find that like, it's a bit of a story, but like I went to see my cousin, and my cousin's dad is a heart surgeon, and he had a shoulder issue, and I hadn't seen him in years. And I was like, let me take a look at your shoulder. And we just did some very small like effectively self-myofascial release to give him a little bit more range, and then some stabilizing stuff and strengthening stuff. And I think it took about 15 minutes. He's like, oh, my shoulder hasn't felt like that in years. And he was like, I'll probably tell my surgeon in 4 weeks that I don't need the surgery. I was like, you're going to have surgery? I was like, when did you ever do any strengthening or movement work on this? Anyway, this is a very, very Chinese thing, but like he messages either my dad or my cousin afterwards. And he goes, I just thought he was like kind of dumb, but worked out a lot. And I was like, I just fixed a heart surgeon's shoulder who was just about to go get it like opened up for almost no reason. He was just like, he's basically been in this position his entire life. So no wonder his shoulders suck. Yeah. And then he goes and plays golf and tennis. Right. So yeah, I don't really take offense to it anymore, because I'm like, you know, it's always better to be underestimated. Like if you elevate yourself to this position where you're like, I am a expert of all things movement, and you only really have like space to fall, right? So I was like, I'm a personal trainer, I'm still on my learning journey. I'm educating other people so they can move further on their learning journey. And I still work with clients to get them fitter and out of pain.
Mate, that's awesome. How do you manage your time? Like, it sounds like you've got a lot going on, mate. You've got a lot with clients, you're working on coaching, you're designing courses. What can you tell us about time management for yourself?
I actually have more time than you probably think, but it's set up that way deliberately because the priority is me like enjoying life to some extent. And it's like enjoying the little things. Like if I want to go for a coffee after this podcast, which I'm not going to do because I'm not on caffeine, but if I want to go for a tea at the local cafe and just sit and watch the world go by for 20 minutes, I can do that. And it's like, I think I started this thing in London, which kind of didn't go really well. I had a few people doing it and I called them like NNCs, like no networking coffee. It's like, I want to just sit and chat. I don't want this to be a networking thing. And I found that like in London, everything was a networking. You know, it's like, let's chat. It's like, so you get like 10 minutes in and they're like, so what do you want to talk about? I was like, literally nothing. There's just catch up. How you been, man? And there's a lost art in that, right? And like, even if you want to talk it from a business perspective, right, it's this, people become aware that someone always wants something from you, right? Whether it's the personal training industry, whether it's the banking industry, whatever it is. It's like people don't go and have coffees just to catch up, right? And when you start having those coffees to not catch up, you know, the first few times you're like, oh, I feel like I could have maybe done something like business-wise around that conversation. And then you start coming away from them and like, wasn't it nice to just not talk about work for a second, right? And it's like getting out of that hustle culture. And whilst I do appreciate like the graft it takes to build businesses and stuff, people build relationships with people based on the relationship that they have with them. And it's like, if I've had a conversation with someone for the past year about, and I know everything about them, their kids, everything, and then they come to me and they're like, mate, I really need help my back. They've made a very active decision in that moment. They're like, this is someone I fully trust, right? I didn't go and search who's the cheapest personal trainer in the area. It's like, based on everything that's going on, I know you relate to me. I know you suffer with anxiety sometimes. I know you stress sometimes. I know this person knows what I'm going through, right? And so I think there's like I said, there's a lost art in these no networking coffees. But other than that, Sunday is pretty much my programming day. Because what I found was like, when I was trying to split it over like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, clients don't always fill in their programming until like the end of the week. So I'm like trying to go down this advancing their program and I haven't got any results. And then I'm like bugging them while they're at work. And I'm like, right, you guys have until Sunday to get your programming done. On Sunday morning, I am starting your programming like for the next week. If you haven't got it done, it is going to be the same thing next week because there's no point in me advancing it if you haven't done it, right? So that gives them the knowledge that like, well, if they were busy on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they can catch it up on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and I'll still get their program to them, right? So I generally allocate Sunday for my go through programming day. And then Wednesday, I will generally message people and go, based on the videos you've sent me, before you get into the next session, fix this, this, and this. So Wednesday, I'll kind of go through the videos, but not go through much of the programming. And that's what my remote training side takes up. I can make it take up every single day of my week, but I generally cap myself at 40 remote clients. I have 30 right now, but I cap myself at 40 because I'm like, I can keep going and still deliver the service, but it takes away from my life. And if I keep going with building that business and stick to my 2 days a week, I now don't deliver the service that I should be delivering, right? Because I'm not allocated enough time to it. I go down to March on usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays to both train from a social perspective and do the work with PFCA. Usually that's some form of media, creating some kind of content or like designing courses. And that's always good because there's like, we're all working towards a collective goal. There's a good bit of banter in the room as well, but there's still very much a work atmosphere going on. I know sometimes you get into a room with like 6 other people, you don't get anything done because you're just talking all the time, but it's definitely not like that. And then more recently, it's just been like blocking out an hour a day just to create content. And it's like, I have so many videos that I filmed from the gym. Sometimes it's just a case of like doing a voice overlay from those videos. Like at the start, it would take me hours and hours and hours because I'm like, I need to film this. I need to film this. And like, I've got so many videos of me doing a squat. And I've got so many videos of me doing a snatch, right? I can overlay these things. And I've been building that through TikTok, Instagram Reels, and Facebook Reels. Personally, like, I find TikTok so frustrating because it's like, as you can probably tell, I'm more of a storyteller, and TikTok needs the entire point to your story in the first 2.5 seconds. Yeah. It's like, otherwise it's gone. So that's been a challenge for me, but the Facebook Reels has kind of popped off. I've been doing that for like 24 days and got my first 100K video this morning, which was cool. And it was interesting because it was the one about how I don't always enjoy my training. I don't always, I don't enjoy aerobic training. I just don't. I don't get this runner's high thing. Like it doesn't, I get the endorphins, but the runner's high, no, that's not me. So I make my aerobic work as easy as possible. And I do it because ultimately I understand the benefits to 50-year-old, 60-year-old, 70-year-old Mike, right? And so that was relatable to a lot of people because I was like, not all personal trainers just train 6 days a week and like love their training and are just like that cheerleading style coach. Some are, and there's room for that. You know, I don't think any of these, like, I always say, like, I would never get a job at like Barry's or One Rebel because I'm like, they'd be like, dude, cheer up. I'm like, no, this is me this today. It's like, yeah, you need to inject me with some adrenaline or something to get me to that level. And I can turn it on now and then, but I certainly wouldn't be able to do it 5 hours a day.
Yeah, especially with that coffee, mate.
Yeah, no coffee.
So how are you finding your energy, your mood, your ability to recover, all these things now in comparison to the days that you were obviously
my ability to recover is so much better. My ability to recover is so much better actually as well, because I do a lot more bodybuilding style training at the moment to supplement my Olympic weightlifting. And even things like back squats, they've not been in my program for a good year. And I have safety bar squats, leg extensions, hack squats, things like that instead, because they just put less pressure on my joints and allow me to recover better. And ultimately, historically, my knees or my hips would go before my leg gains actually arrived. And so it's like, it was almost gospel that you need to be squatting 2 to 3 times a week, relatively heavy, to make back squat gains within Olympic weightlifting. And I was like, well, my knees go first before the gains actually arrive. So finding a way to stress the muscle without necessarily putting it under too much joint strain was pretty key. So yeah, my energy feels pretty good at the moment, especially considering I don't drink too much coffee. Though I am feeling one. I've got this internal feeling one.
We've talked about it too much.
maybe I'll go have like a decaf just to scratch the itch. But no, like I sleep pretty well. I will actually wake up with the sun because I don't actually have any curtains because I bought a gym instead. I built a gym in my garage and just didn't really furnish the house properly. So I wake up probably a bit early at the moment, but I don't really mind it.
Is there any tools, apps, tips or tricks that you've found helpful in the day-to-day running of your business that you'd like to share?
Just trying to think. I mean, the best one is like, for me, would be like find a payment system and stick with it. And it sounds like a crazy thing, but like even now I have people paying me across like 3 different payment systems, which is a bit of a nightmare if I'm honest. Like I would probably just use Square if I was starting again and then just get everyone to go through that. So that would be one thing. The other thing from a business perspective is if you don't have every single way for them to take payment, you're going to miss out on someone. It's just that extra barrier, right? So it's like my Go Cardless clients really only work in the UK properly. Everywhere else, it has a bit of a barrier. I can take payments from other countries, but it's just a bit inconvenient. So almost everyone has an Amex, a Visa, or a MasterCard of some kind. So as long as you can take payment via those, like you're golden. Early days, it was bank transfer, right? And you'll have done it as well. You send people your bank details, and it's just like you send them a link and they can chuck it on a card without thinking. It's no problem because card payments are so fast. Whereas bank transfer means they've got to go into their online banking, and depending on their security, they might need like that little card or key or like code from their app. And it's just one of those things where maybe it failed to pay sometimes, and then they're like, oh, I can't believe this. This is too much effort, right? Like humans want things now and they want things seamlessly. And it's amazing how a technical issue can completely detract from the fact that you might be the best coach for them. So yeah, that's a business thing that I would definitely say to people is like, whether it's, PayPal, whether it's, credit cards, just make sure you've always got a way to take payment from that client. Don't make it harder than it needs to be.
Yeah, exactly. What app do you use to coach your clients with?
So I use True Coach. I have played with switching to other ones, but right now it's the logistical nightmare of switching over that many people to a new thing whilst I get used to it as well. I did play around with Coach RX from OPEX, but it had some cool features, but ultimately it was pretty much the same. And again, it wouldn't be worth me flipping everyone over. From what I understand, like Fitter, Wadboard, stuff like that, Train Heroic are much better if you have like a group training or a template training style.
Dude, I think we could talk on and on and on. There's so many things I could chat about, but you've given us a great insight to how you run your business and what's going on for you. What are future plans?
Oh, what are future plans? Grow the education side of say even more. Like I do want to do that, and I am actually enjoying doing that stuff. I'd quite like to be able to help both lower ticket and higher ticket income brackets. So I'm kind of thinking of a way that I would do that without really losing quality of service. So this thing in my mind is like, I could create a PDF, no problem, chuck a bunch of exercises on it, sell it for like $19 and it would sell, but it doesn't deliver like my knowledge and it doesn't make a client adhere to it. So I think in the long term, what I'm trying to do is actually create more like a group, whether it's a Facebook group, whatever it is. Like recently with the Facebook Reels thing going well, I picked up like 1,000 new followers from 0 in the past 20 days, which has been awesome. And they're quite actively engaging. So it's like, okay, maybe you charge like £9 a month to these 1,000 people of this group. And we do something a little bit more like we have Zoom calls, we have like seminars, webinars, that kind of thing that they can watch, a bit more like content focused rather than here's a PDF, go buy it. Because that to me would be like actively engaging with people. And it's like, generally everyone wants human connection of some kind, whether it's through their training, whether it's through their coaching, whether it's through like just their friendships and stuff. And people are way more likely to adhere to it if they can put a name to the face. Like if I've never met 90% of these people, whether it's remotely or whatever, and they've never actually asked me questions or anything, they're very unlikely to stick to it. And I kind of always use myself as like, I mean, I've got about 3 courses at the moment that I have bought in the past 2 years that I haven't even started.
Yep.
And it's like, because no one is holding me accountable to doing it. There's no deadline. There's no, like, I bought it in a moment of like, oh, there's money in my account, I'll buy that because that looks interesting. And then I haven't even opened them.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Why haven't I done that? So yeah, and if you think about people who are trying to get into fitness and like trying to even just take that first step of like joining a gym or whatever it might be, for a lot of them, there's way more barriers than I can even perceive, right? There's how you feel about yourself walking into a gym. There might be the monetary aspect. There might be elements where they've failed before. All of these things that I don't really know about, but could potentially create videos on to help people. So that is the current kind of goal with this stuff.
Yeah, thinking outside the box, mate. You seem to be quite good at that, finding like this, void in the market or this space in the market for something. So
yeah, I'm trying, and I feel more motivated to do it more recently. But yeah.
Mate, before we finish up, there's sort of 3 questions I like to ask at the end of the podcast. Question number 1 is, if you could gift a personal trainer a resource, it could be a book, it could be a YouTube video, it could be a TED talk, whatever, that might help them build more of a sustainable business, is there anything you'd recommend?
I mean, I always recommend this to pretty much anyone in any business, is effectively, Simon Sinek's Start With Why, and then the follow-up book, which is, I think, Find Your Why. Because I remember reading Start Your Why and I was like, cool, how do I do this? And then obviously the kind of next book was actually quite good as well, because I think it always comes down to why you're doing it. And it's okay to do it from a sense of like financial gain, because at the end of the day, I think people always try and figure out a way that's like, well, actually, I just want money to pay my bills and freedom, but I feel like I need to come up with something bigger than that. When really, like, most of the time that money facilitates the why, right? It's like earning, 10K a month means that I can go and be wherever I want, but it also means that I could like maybe pay for medical bills for a family member or whatever it is. There's usually a reason why. Sometimes it's a bit more materialistic, but sometimes it's not. So Start With Why is one. Mindset, I want to say Carol Dweck is the author, and that was one that really helped me as a coach get out of my own almost limiting beliefs. But then that obviously translates to clients, and then when you can have a talk about that, it's like when why a client believes that they can't necessarily lift a certain weight or run a certain time, it's like digging a little bit deeper into why. Almost all of the books that I'd recommend are very lifestyle focused, because if you understand that, you can relate to someone so much better than the world's best technical coach with no like EQ. Yeah. And I mean, I imagine, like, I said this on someone's post the other day about how these super high knowledge technical coaches really better serve coaching coaches as clients, because they understand the language and they can fill in the gaps. Whereas sometimes, when someone's talking about creating torque in external rotation about your hip, and your client's like, cool, I just want to run faster. Like, sometimes they don't like that code. They don't match, even though if this person could better explain, they'd be perfect. And so this person is better to explain to this person who has the social EQ to then relay that message. And I think Mindset is actually quite a good book for understanding people's limiting beliefs. So I had like a spider. I mean, it's not a spider in relation to your spiders.
Yeah, tiny.
It probably wasn't even half the size of an ant, but it was a spider, and it was starting to crawl over the webcam lens. So I was like, nope.
You didn't scream, mate, so it's okay.
No, exactly. So yeah, that's kind of what I'd recommend.
Yeah, great resources, mate. I like Simon Sinek's Find Your Why, and I think it's definitely an important part of building a successful business is understanding your why. It's your motivation, what gets you out of bed in the morning, like helps you stay on track with what you're trying to achieve.
I think the other way to phrase it is actually like it's your purpose, right? And actually, you can go down. I can't remember the name of the book now. Backbone, I think it was, is much more in relation to guys, and there's like, a man without purpose is effectively lost. Like, you can keep going and doing the things that you're good at, but if you don't really understand why you're doing them, you never really get that sense of fulfillment. And that book has some great points and it has some like not so great points. But I think fundamentally, when people don't have a purpose, or in that sense a why, it's very, very difficult to keep going with whatever it is you're doing.
Yeah, and easy to get distracted. Question number 2 is, what advice would you give to a younger version of yourself?
Probably listen to the people that have been there and done that a bit more often. Not all of them, because some of them were just nuts, but I probably would have, I don't know, it's hard. The back injury made me go down a certain route, right, with my own training and my knowledge base and stuff like that. So like, I don't regret those things happening, but it was a pretty big inconvenience in my life that I could have avoided, right? Everything in moderation ultimately leads to like better progress, right? But there's also times where it's okay to put all of your effort into those things. So, whilst I talk about how those 40, 45 hours a week like burnt me out, they did also allow me to buy my house in London, which then was a huge part of financial relief for me, because I wasn't then paying rent all the time. So it was, in that sense, it's like, if you're burning out and there isn't actually any reason for it, what are you doing, right? Because if the goal is like, I need to hustle all of these hours to reach this goal and then I'm going to dial back, that's okay, because you can kind of bounce back and recover, and human beings are pretty good at that. It's like that stress adaptation. It's like, but too much stress breaks you, and it either breaks you physically, it breaks you mentally, it breaks you emotionally. And you have to understand at some point, like, is everything I'm doing worth going through? And if the answer is yes, then you can keep going. But if you ever kind of get that point where it's like, what am I doing? That the answer is probably no, right? So I would say, a little bit of more moderation across my own like training would have saved me from injury, and a bit of moderation across my work probably would have saved a few, social relationships, like actual relationships, stuff like that as well. So yeah, that would be my advice. Is moderation isn't you not hustling, it's you understanding where your efforts are best placed.
Yeah, where to hustle and where not to hustle, mate, and making sure it's
Yeah.
worthwhile. Right, the last question for you, mate. If you could have dinner with anyone, be them dead or alive, who would it be and why?
So I grew up racing, so it'd actually be Michael Schumacher. So yeah, that'd be my big hero of mine growing up.
Yeah, definitely. Wicked, man. Mike, I really appreciate your time. It's been awesome to hear, more about your story, the journey you've been on, and, where you're heading and what you're doing. So thanks for carving the time out.
No worries, mate. No worries. It was a good chat.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Protect the Asset podcast. I'd be grateful if you can leave a comment, add a review, and share this podcast with those who might find it helpful. A lot of personal trainers want to build an online business that allows them to have more freedom in their life, but they lack the business skills to succeed on their own. They've tried building a website, consistently posting on social media, creating a YouTube channel, and sharing loads of education material, but none of it seems to help their online business grow. They're left feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, and ready to give up. I get it. I moved my personal training career online in 2018. I believe personal trainers deserve to have an online business that allows them to work less and earn more. So I created the Protect the Asset business coaching program that teaches online personal trainers the business skills they need to succeed. It's time to stop wasting time on marketing and sales strategies that just don't work. If you want to build an online business, but you're not sure of the best way to go about it, visit www.protecttheasset.co to learn about building a business that gives you both freedom and financial security. Thanks for listening, and I wish you all the success and happiness in your personal training career.